Hey everybody, what's happening? I've got one for you this week. I've been thinking about this a lot. I want to talk about ageism. It's a tough topic. No matter where you go with it, you feel like there are pitfalls and there's some kind of paradox that you can't get out of. And it is rife with that. But I think I might surprise you with the angle I come at this from. Maybe not, but I think I might surprise you. Here's the I was all set. I was getting this idea sort of in my head this week. I was thinking about it. And then yesterday, I heard a podcast by George Robb. If you don't know George, George is a guy you should check out. He does a podcast called the Geologic Podcast. George, last name spelled H-R-A-B, George Robb. I've worked with George for years. He's a drummer, singer, songwriter, really incredibly bright guy. And in fact, I just finished a project with him. He was doing an album, and I was doing horn parts and playing on it, and wrote the horn parts, played the horn parts. Just saw his record get released. Really, really interesting cat, and has his integrity. He's a guy who really tries very hard to, never has an ego. There's not a lot of ego there. It's mainly trying to figure out, am I being honest? Am I being right? Really drilling down. And George said something, made a point yesterday. It's not my point, but it's a slightly different subject, but it dovetails really nicely. And I'm just going to try to encapsulate what George was saying, and then I think you'll see where I'm at. George is some 7 years younger than me. All right, so he's just starting to hit that half century mark, and all sorts of assumptions get made, right? Okay, but he made this point. He started from the idea of let's talk to musicians about musicians, and he was saying if you are playing somewhere, all the musicians on stage can tell who all the musicians in the crowd are. He described them as the people at the back door but you could tell them by their dress. You could tell they're sitting there with their arms crossed, very critical, making some snide remarks more than likely, And he says that all of us who are musicians have either been the people on the stage watching those guys, or have been those guys off the stage watching the band play. And he got very critical of that tendency musicians have to be just hypercritical, generally unhappy. Nothing's good enough. Everything's lousy. Everything was better in their time. All of that, right? And he says, boy, you don't want to be that guy. Don't be that person. And he went on to say, for the most part, although some things get better and some things get worse, and some things get better and some things get worse, and that does happen. Some standards are, and other standards are better. And okay, there's movement there. In general, he made the point about Saturday Night Live skits. That probably 16%, maybe 30%, I think it was somewhere in that area, are actually good and the rest is garbage. And he goes, that's been true since 1977, or 1975 or whenever Saturday Night Live came out. And I think he's probably right about that. Yes, casts have come up and down, but those of us old enough to remember the original, and I was just a kid, and it was so great, but it was so great because it was new to us. It wasn't so great because it wasn't necessarily, they were very good. But, the whole idea that there's never been anything ever good again, that can't be true, right? That can't actually be true. It is what it is. So that hit rate hasn't changed probably a whole hell of a lot. And it's a good point. He made it very, very, very well. So he was on one hand, is he very frustrated with that, the cynical musician and all of that goes with it. The guy who says, I've seen it all. Yeah, not great, right? Okay. And then he said, but he says, I had a horrible weekend listening to music this weekend. And his problem was, he said he went out and he saw a bunch of shows, and it was sort of rife with a lack of professionalism. People who couldn't start on time, people who didn't seem to have a set list, knew what they were going to play. I mean, you down the line of things where you just go, okay. If he's critical of that, and I think it's a fair criticism, people will point at George and go, generational. You're the old guy who says you've become what he was just describing. But is it fair? Can you make that argument? Or is that argument a little weak? Couple things. I've known George, like I say, for over 20 years. George had these standards about performance 25 years ago. Nothing's changed that way. So he has a standard, a very high standard. He always has a set list. He always starts on time. Because he feels the audience deserves that. You are putting on a performance. There are standards of professionalism. And he wants to adhere to those. So he does. Fine. But if he points that, so ageism, if his opinion hasn't changed, on one level, that means he has his integrity. His standards have remained the same. He isn't, right? Professional standard is professional standard. Okay, so you can't say, well, the age, it's because of age. It's not because of age. He's always had the standard. However, there are some people who sit there and go, well, if your standards haven't changed, then you're not keeping up with the times, and therefore it's because you're old ageism. You've become again that guy. So if you change, I mean, you can't win. If you change your opinions, we all change our opinions, but I mean, if it's a radical change of standards, then you just don't have any integrity. You're just going wherever you're going to get the most mouth clicks or what, right? You're pandering. If you keep your integrity and you keep your standards, you haven't changed with the times. That's a tough one. That's a tough one. And so that was George's point. George's point was, boy, I think I got a right to say these things. He was very frustrated about it. And again, I think he showed great balance because starting off, he was saying, you don't want to be the old guy who thinks you have to give it up to me now because I'm, right? I remember those guys growing up. I was not the kind of kid who hung around with a lot of the other kids. I did, but I really liked hanging around with my dad, and I liked hanging around with my dad's friends. I was a very precocious kid, and I wanted to sit in the room quietly and listen to those conversations about whatever they were talking about, politics of the day, whatever it was. I wanted to hear their perspectives. I liked hearing the perspectives of older people. And the things that they dismissed and said, oh, no, that we've seen that before, no big deal. And I was very curious as to how they came to these conclusions that they did. How did that happen? How does that work? So, that sort of, it was obvious to me that you could get something from older folks, assuming they were, old and wise. Well, I didn't care about old. All I cared about was wise, because there were tons of the town crank, right? The guy who, I grew up in a little town in Maine, on the coast of Maine. We had our town, I remember him. I remember, we had more than one, the town crank, the guy who would go to every town council meeting, and, convinced that he had seen it all, and again, demanded, I'm old, and therefore I've earned respect simply by being old. You could be an idiot, but as long as you're old, then you get, no, 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 no. And I was always against that. I was like, wait a minute. Old and wise. Well, if you're wise, you get the respect. If you're just old and are an idiot, because you've always been an idiot, you don't get respect. You get respect based on what have you got. There were plenty of people who were wise. Listen to them. And I did. And I think it's good. It's a good thing. But yeah, always with the being careful, because there were folks who were just going to demand. I don't like the demanding of respect. Respect is earned. Anyone who needs respect that much, that should be a tell, right? No one respects needy. No one should respect needy, right? That's a sign that there's problems there. People are conflating things because they need that. Okay, then they become less of an honest actor, and you can't really. Okay. So look, I see very much this, the both sides of this danger, right? At the same time, but I've always hated ageism right across the board. When we were kids, right, you were dismissed for a long time. And then somewhere in your middle to late 20s usually, they suddenly decided, the big indifferent world decided you were an adult now. You started getting all the perks. Had nothing to do with you. Had only to be, oh, you've reached a certain, and it's almost unconscious. It's a thing that just happens in the culture. And the reverse happens as well. Now, again, it's I think the interesting part is that I think, look, we're all going to be guilty of having some confirmation biases, right? But based on, we have to constantly, as you get older, right, there's a responsibility, more of a responsibility on us as individuals to check ourselves and say, wait a minute, was that thing that I think was so great just because I lived through it at a particular time and it was formative for me? Well, just because it was formative for me doesn't mean that it needs to be formative for somebody else. Time has flown. The culture that was there is not going to be there again. They're going to have their culture. So it could still be meaningful for you, but it doesn't mean it has to be meaningful for other people, that they have to get it the same way you got it or liked it. So, this is, but at the same time, can criticisms be made that are legitimate of contemporary culture? And yeah, I think there are, right? Because standards do go up and down. And when you notice some standards slipping, I think you could say so. I sometimes love bad sports analogies, but I try to run from them and not use them too much. But somebody used to say, what was the great quote? Life imitates the World Series. That everything you really wanted to know, you could see, right? There was a great microcosm. Sports can be a great microcosm, right? Sports leagues do go up and down. The qualities of their games go up and down. They tweak rules, they change things, and they can sometimes really hurt their sport and then make it bad. Yeah, these things change. Well, they're not necessarily better. There is no better or worse. Well, I don't know. I think people who are historians of these various sports would say there was a golden age. There was a period when this sport really had it together. And then there was a period of time where they kind of got lost. Yep. That does happen. I've watched it happen time and again. So, yeah, I think those kind of criticisms can be, there are legitimate criticisms that can be made. Not everything is onward and upward, that whatever happened yesterday was the best thing that ever, oh no, it's not anymore, because today happened. Now that's the greatest thing that ever happened, because it happened today. We do a lot of that. That can't be right either, right? Again, we're always having these conversations about balance, but I think it's fair. I think it's fair, but are there lots of blowhards out there who are not aware enough or don't have individual integrity enough to sit there and say, maybe I should check myself. Yeah, it's called, I believe it's called House of Representatives and the Senate. Hey, there are some, well, you see it all on display there. There's a lot of, particularly in the Senate, where you get really, really old guys. And you see this across party boundaries. There are folks who shouldn't be there and shouldn't have been there for a long time, are totally out of touch with the culture. One of the reasons we can't deal with our technology issues, and it's going to bite us in the ass because AI is coming, we can't move fast enough, is, well, the system isn't designed to move fast. That's a problem. And the people there are remarkably out of touch because they're dealing with their power battles, which is all they tend to deal with. And they all tend to be way too old. So they're older and they're slower and they're not picking up on this and they're still sort of living in another time. And those are the guys running things. That's a problem. So I want younger people. I want a healthy mix. I would like less of the old people running things. I'm at an age now where I don't think people, much older than maybe 15, 17 years. And after that, you kind of got to be through. Now, luckily, I'm in a field where that's not going to affect me too much. I picked that one well. If you're in the arts, you could go forever, which is great. And there is no retirement in the arts. You just keep going. Then you die and then it's done. So that's cool. But in certain fields, yeah, there probably needs to be an age limit. Most of the people running for president should be disqualified because of their age. It doesn't mean they don't have something to give. It doesn't mean that, I'm not saying put everybody out to pasture, but there's too much of really, really old folks. And some of them very competent and so forth, but man, it can't be the same as when they were, 45 or whatever, some other age. Don't get me wrong, there are crazy young people too. Crazy knows no boundary. So that's all over the place. But I just think I think we're a little too quick, and maybe I was just guilty of it, but I think we're a little too quick of saying, hey, you are, your opinion is a result purely of your age. It might not be. It might not be. There is an ability, again, depending on the source, depending on the integrity of that source. None of us are perfect, right? You don't just say, well, he's not a perfect person. I got him. No. I mean, we're all going to make mistakes. But if there is a serious good faith effort, a self-examination, sit there and go, am I saying these things? And as you get older, you need to do it more. Onus is on a person like myself as we get older to sit there and go, wait a minute. Is that why you're doing this? And if you are, you got to back off. I thought George's point was great though, because if standards, if he saw bad performance standards, then it's okay to say those are bad performance. Well, the standards have changed. We want to be more real now. More real means unprepared. Unpreparedness is a thing. I listen. Again, these are very, very, very tough things. But I think there is some, and there has to be some, if you keep lowering the standards long enough, then all amateurism is, that's the bell ideal. That's what we should. It's not. That can't be, right? It just can't be. On a different note, why am I wearing this shirt? What is up with the shirt I'm wearing? I am wearing the shirt of Williams Racing. Williams Racing is an F1 team. I love that Formula One. Love it. All right. I got introduced. My son wanted to see some. I went. He was 12. And he's like, let's go to Monaco. I'm like, well, we're not going to, wait a minute. Straight shot, 5 hours from me is Montreal. Let's go to Canada. We went to Montreal and saw an F1 race. There's not much to see. The car just, okay. But that noise and that color, and it got us. It got both of us. We loved the whole freaking thing. Not a lot of people, it's getting more popular in the States, but not a lot of people wear F1 gear. I've gotten very into driving. I like driving. And I like some of the, there's only 10 teams, but the real bad teams, the ones that never can seem to get anywhere. I am the eternal optimist in me thinks that's cool or funny. Nobody wears their gear. So I'm wearing Williams Racing. Williams has been in last or next to last since I've been watching this. They were a great team once upon a time, but they have not been in a long time. And I just love the optimism in that sport. It's an English team. They always show like these ads, and they've got their little ads that, you know, if you follow the stuff, they've got their own little, you know, fresh-faced British girls sitting and going, we are Williams. They're so proud, you know, and they go get killed. but a stiff upper lip and the chin out, and nope, we're okay. You know, they're almost poster children for getting it wrong and saying, no, we were right, we're going to do it again. And then I think the people there understand that getting better in that sport is very, very hard to do, and it's a very long process, and it can take a while. And they don't have dumb people there right now. So, and I have a soft spot for Williams. I really do. shows you, I'm just a sucker for hard luck cases. Right, I'm a musician, of course. I've got, you know, I'm empathetic. I've got all my cheeks turned to the wall. Anyway. So anyway, that's what I've got for you guys. Listen, give me a like. I need some likes, dudes. I need some subscriptions. I need some likes. So give me some likes. I need them. And feel free to let me know. I think it's the ageism thing, very difficult topic. Let me know what you think. Next week, I'm going to hit you with even harder stuff. All right, talk to you guys soon. Take care.